Hello, Dembash, Rozbakher, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to Zahra Institute's 2024 Full Speaker Series. I am Mustafa Durmaz. Currently, I serve as a teaching faculty at Zahra Institute, and I am also a PhD candidate at Indiana University in the Department of Central Eurasian Studies. Before I introduce you our guest today, I would like to briefly share the upcoming lectures, which are the part of Zahra Institute's Full Speaker Series. So as you can see, there are 5 lectures which are part of this series. The first one was on September 18 with Mamoste Mehmet Ali Konar and Sabahattin Shen. Recording of this lecture is available on YouTube. For those who have missed it, you can go ahead and watch it on YouTube as well. So today we'll be with Ahmad Mohammadpour, Dr. Ahmad Mohammadpour, who I will be introducing momentarily. The third lecture will be on October 23rd with Mamoste Michael Kite, and his talk will be on a methodology for standardizing Kurdish, which is a very much needed topic in Kurdish language standardization. The next lecture will be on November 6th with Professor Joanna Bochenska, and she will deliver a lecture on Kurdish heritage, art, and literature. And the last lecture of this series will be on December 4th with Professor Akihoko Yamaguchi, who will be talking on a comparative study with Ottoman Kurdish policies. And this will conclude the series of this semester. So today our guest is Dr. Ahmad Mohammadpour. Dr. Ahmad Mohammadpour is a Kurdish sociologist and anthropologist from Eastern Iranian Kurdistan, also known as Roshalat. He currently serves as an assistant professor of sociology of race and ethnic relations at Bentley University. Dr. Mohammadpour holds dual PhD degrees, one in sociology from Shiraz University and another in anthropology from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. A multilingual scholar, he has taught in English, Persian, and Kurdish at institutions such as University of Alabama, University of Massachusetts Amherst, Vanderbilt University, Bu Ali Sina University in Iran, and Salahuddin University in Iraqi Kurdistan. Dr. Mohammadpour's research focuses on contemporary Iran's intellectual thought, internal colonialism, ethnoreligious minoritized communities, and the political economy of de-development with a focus on Kurds in Iran. His works has been published in various international peer-reviewed journals, including American Anthropologist, Kurd Anthropology, Asian Studies Review, Asian Studies, Gender, Work and Organizations, Security Dialogue, the British Journal of Sociology, Critical Sociology, the Third World Quarterly, Nations and Nationalism, Ethnicities, Quality and Quantity, International Journal of Methodology, the British Journal of Middle Eastern Studies, and International Journal of Qualitative Studies on Health and Well-being. So I will now hand the stage over to Professor Mohammadpour. His lecture will last approximately 30 to 40 minutes, followed by a Q&A session where I will be happy to take your questions. You can either type your questions in the chat or raise your hand by clicking the reaction button at the bottom of your screen.
Thank you very much, Mustafa, for this very generous introduction. Hello, everyone. I would like to thank Professor Bilisi, you and Ibrahim Demir, and basically we have Shahrina, all those people who made this lecture possible. I know that there are many people involved in this workshop, in this lecture to happen. So I am very thankful, very grateful for this opportunity that you provided for me. So my lecture today, if you allow me to share my, for a moment, my presentation. Yes, so it seems that, yes. Yes. My presentation today is about Berlin Circle from sorry, just some adjustments, and that's it. Berlin Circle from 1916 to 25 and the rise of Persianism in the early 20th century. Why Berlin Circle is so important to us? The reason is that when you look at the Iranian nationalism or Iranian intellectual thought or Persianism as we see today, this idea, this invention goes back intellectually and historically to basically the early 20th century. But to fully understand the Berlin Circle as the foundational moment where the idea of Iran is constructed, where the idea of Iran is invented, because Iran, as I argued in my publications elsewhere, I always argued that Iranian nationalism is more of an intellectual invention than a political project. It's a political project. There is no question that we have an entity such as Iranian nation state, but it was also, and it has always been a sort of idea and it's sort of Orientalist invention. So to understand that Orientalist invention that materializes basically in the early 20th century with the rise of the Pahlavi nation state, we have to go back, we have to step back a little bit farther back into history to the 18th and 19th centuries European Orientalism. So please keep up with me. It's gonna be a little bit boring in terms of the historical moments that we need to engage with, but I promise that it's gonna be fun, make it fun for our audience. So Iran in the 18th and 19th century Orientalist discourse. And I will try to make sure that, to connect all these dots and how all these intellectual developments in the 18th and 19th centuries in Europe, they get kind of connected. They get together, they come together in the early 20th century to create a sort of foundation for the Iranian nationalism through the work of the intellectuals of Berlin Circle. So the first moment starts with William Jones' discovery of the Sanskrit language. Why this is important? William Jones is working in the height of the British colonialism in India. He is a Calcutta High Court judge. He is funded and supported by the British company, by Indian British company, basically. British Indian company, I'm sorry, East Indian company, so to speak. So one of the reasons that he's interested in the language, in the Sanskrit language, is that he is going to offer a sort of Orientalized account of Bible. So much of what we see in 18th century in Europe in terms of the scholarship is kind of directly or indirectly driven by the study of Bible, by the study of the book of Genesis, by the Old Testament, and then by modern Bible. So it's all driven by this theological understanding of the human race and the human history. So he's interested in Sanskrit. He's all of a sudden is introduced to Sanskrit language. And that's interesting because before the introduction of Sanskrit, before the discovery of Sanskrit as the mother of all languages, there were two other candidates. There were Hebrew language and basically Greece language. The Greece language was the language of the philosophy for centuries, for thousands of years. So William Jones discovered this. He claimed that he has discovered the Sanskrit. And why this is important, basically, for Iranian nationalism? The importance is that when William Jones talks about the discovery of Sanskrit language and how powerful is this language in terms of the grammar, in terms of the form, in terms of the vocab and content, he basically argues that Persian language might be from the same family that a Sanskrit language comes from. So he simply puts Persian language, even though he is talking in, 1776. We don't know much about the Persian language. Much of his information about Persian language comes from the Zoroastrian Parsis or Persians of India. They're called Parsis or Parsis of India. So this is a critical moment in linguistic and basically in the study of language and culture. The idea that, okay, well, now we have been able to find the racial lineage, the racial genealogy of the Europeans. The Sanskrit is the mother language of Indo-European languages. So around 1 century later, we have Max Müller, the German linguist, who was basically taken to British, and through the financial support of the British Indian company, he goes to India, and then he studies Sanskrit, he studies language, he studies philology, and then he makes a bigger claim. He says that, okay, well, now that the Sanskrit is the mother language of all humanity, is the oldest language in the humanity, this language cannot be coming from the India, given that in terms of the shape and the color and the nose, the white, fair hair, basically blonde European people cannot be descendant of the coming from the Indian people, from the Indian subcontinent people. So he comes up with the idea of the Aryan invasion theory. He talks about how a group of Aryan people from the basically Central Asia and Russia, they in different waves and in different roads, they go to Indian subcontinent. Some of them, they reside in North India. Some of them, they reside in today's Iran. And he's one of those guys who talks about the Aryan Brotherhood. And then finally, he comes to this conclusion that the Persians are from the Aryan descent. So you see that how the language and race get connected for over around a century long of discussion in the European Orientalist circles. And then we have Friedrich Schlegel, who talks about, who gives a sort of anthropological twist to the Aryan race theory. And he claims that, okay, well, the today's German, or the German came from, or they were kind of the children or the descendant of the old Persians. So you see that the idea of race, blood, and language, they come together. And also Schlegel, he invents the idea of Aryan as a sort of denoting the term race or blood or air in German language. And then, as we see, all these discussions in the 18th, 19th centuries are philological discussions. We don't have any archaeological, any anthropological evidence to support this claim. So we see all these discrepancy between the science of philology, which has become now, in the 19th and 18th century, has become a sort of master discipline, versus the archaeology and anthropology that they don't support these claims. However, Aryanism from the mid-19th centuries, mid-19th century, at the hand of the German romanticists, German ideology, German thinkers, it becomes a sort of dominant paradigm of thinking about the Orient and thinking about the Iran And this kind of interesting because the term Iran and the name Iran was very helpful because Iran was kind of it bears bore some resemblance with the term Arya. So it's simply they argued that the Iran could be denoted, could be seen as a sort of as a land of Aryans. To go back a little bit to our discussion, as I said, there is a long discussion. We don't have time to go to all these issues. But from the very beginning, the book of Genesis was very important in the Aryan race theory, because the idea was that, okay, well, we had the Noah ship that was, this Noah flood. And the idea was that where is the Noah flood? Some people, some European scholars, they came up with the idea that it landed somewhere in Anatolia. Some claim that it landed in today's Jordan. Some said it's in Indian subcontinent. Some said that it landed in Iran Plateau. So and then the Indian subcontinent for a while became the cradle of humanity. And then at the hand of the German ideologists, German linguists, soon the India became not the origin of Aryan race theory, not the origin of the Sanskrit language, not the origin of all these human civilization. It became the destination of the European civilizations that were somewhat 2,000 years before the BC. They basically migrated to Indian subcontinent, so on and so forth. But anyways, so we have this idea until the 1837, when the cuneiform, basically the Beestone inscription and the cuneiform script, is deciphered by the Henry Rawlinson. It's interesting that most of those archaeologists in the Middle East working on the Mesopotamia, working on the Indian subcontinent, they were either basically military officers, or they were paid or hired by the British Indian company. So in 1837, Sir Henry Rawlinson, a British officer, he claimed to have deciphered the Beestone inscription, where he came across some sort of the Achaemenid history, and the term area that was used, claimed to have been used by Darius the Great, Darius the king of the Achaemenid. And ever since, the idea of Aryanism has been at the heart of the Iranian historiography and then by extension, the Iranian politics. So from the 1850s, we see a flow of European archaeologists coming first from Britain, and then from French, and from German, and then from American at the Iranian plateau. Specifically, the south of Iran becomes a sort of virginal paradise for the European archaeologists from the mid-19th century all the way to throughout the 20th century. Okay, so now we have to always also recognize the share of the French Orientalists in the creation or in shaping of the Iranian nationalism. One of the earlier moments goes back to the Montesquieu. You all know who Montesquieu is. He wrote a fictional novel in 1721 by the title Persian Letter. It's just a fiction, basically. Two Iranian people or tourists or two Iranian people, they talk together about the despotism in France, and then they talk about the Zoroastrian as a sort of a religion that should be acknowledged for the virtue, for the ethics, for the human values. But it's interesting that while Montesquieu is writing, and basically was inspired by Zoroastrianism, he had never read Zoroastrianism. He didn't have any knowledge of the Zoroastrianism. Actually, as Reza Zia Ibrahimi is one of those really important Iranian scholars, he says by the time that the Zand-e Avesta, basically the Zoroastrian text, is translated into French in 1770 something, if I remember, many French and many Europeans, they get irritated because the Zoroastrianism and the text did not support their claims about the Persia and about all these fantastic, history that they imagined it existed. We have to talk about the Dupron, who is one of the French linguists who basically Europeanizes the idea of Aryanism. He's the first one who translate the Zande Avesta, introduced the Avesta or Zande Avesta to Europeans, and also he talks about he disseminate the term Aryan. Well, we have a variety of the term of Aryan, Aryo, area, in Rig Veda, the Sanskrit holy text, and also in the Avesta. But he's the one who provides a sort of Europeanized version of the Aryanism or the Aryan discourse. And finally, not finally, basically, we have two people. Ernest Renan is another one who talks about the white race versus the Semitic people. He makes a very general, a broad classification in which the Arab people, the Semitic people, are basically branded and described as backward people. It's interesting that when Ernest Renan talks about the Islam or the Muslim people or Arabs, he kind of separates Iranians from the rest of the Muslim world. He simply says that the Iranians, they belong to the Aryan race, and specifically because they are Shia. He separates the Shiism from Islam, and he believes that Shiism is more compatible with the Aryan race ideology, with the Aryan race, intellectual thought. It's interesting that he cannot explain how Shiism became the official religion in Iran after the advent of the Safavid dynasty. They are the same people that were converted to Shiism. So we see this Aryan white master race versus the Semitic people, except the Iranians who were Shia Muslim, that also add to this intellectual Orientalist adventure. And finally, we have Arthur de Gobineau, who is very important in the in the shaping of Iranian nationalism, when he in 1855 offers a kind of broad racial classification of human species into white, black, and yellow. And then obviously white, the master is the Indo-European, the Aryan people, and then the black, who are kind of described as backward, as less talented, and the yellow, who are docile, and so on and so forth. And then when it comes to the Iranian, it's interesting that he describes Persian, not obviously not Iranian, Persian as coming from Aryan race, but at the same time, because of their racial miscegenation and amalgamation with other ethnic groups, they are now, according to him, kind of amalgamated, kind of denigrated or degenerated in many ways. He also talks about the bastardization of the Aryan race when they married to people of the Indian subcontinent. So with this intellectual, adventure, intellectual journey at hand, let's take a look at Iran in terms of the political situation in the mid-19th century. You see that in the map that Iran in the mid-19th century, during the Qajar dynasty, obviously it went by the name Mamalik Mahrusei Iran, or the protectorate land of Iran, or protected territories of Iran. So it went kind of like interchangeably, but you see that the land loss and the territorial loss mostly during the Iran-Russia war in 1804 and 1813, and also in 1826 and 1828, in two treaties of Gulistan and Turkmenchai. Iran had to cede a major part of its territory to the Russia. So the question was that, why are we so weak why are we so weak? Why are we being defeated by all these foreign countries, specifically by Russia? So they had a sort of kind of, you know, double position. From one hand, they admired Russian power as a power that could take care of itself, and on the other hand, they were kind of irritated by all these successive defeats by the Russians. So Russian administrative influence was one of these pivotal, one of these foundational intellectual, let's say, things that uh, uh, motivated many Iranian intellectuals in the mid-19th centuries to think about the fate of Iran, the destiny of Iran amid the European expansion in the Middle East, in the Near East, obviously. And then Ottoman Tanzimat, because Ottoman has always been interesting to Iranian nationalism, to Iranian nationalist elites, to Iranian modernist elites. At that time, we didn't have the Iranian nationalist in the sense they were modernists. So they took inspiration in the Ottoman Empire, Tanzimat, and the way that they were trying to keep up, to catch up with the European modernization. That was also another motivation for the Iranian modernists, that finally it led to the constitutional revolution, or in my view, to constitutional movement in 1906 to 1911. As you all know, I am not going to devote most of our time to these historical things, but finally it ended up in creating a sort of mashru'e, or a sort of, you know, Islamicized, let's say, or Shiified constitutionalism, which it was basically defeated in, collapsed in 1911. So we have to be careful when we talk about the constitutional revolution, because it's not a moment where the Iranian nationalism began to invent. It is a moment in which Iranian modernism begins to emerge. It's about modernism. So it is the pinnacle of the Iranian modernism, the Iranian modernist elites, such as, for example, Mustafa al-Dawleh in 1874. He wrote the treatise of Yak Kalame, one word in Persian, which means law, one word. And then we have the Qanun newspaper in 1898 by Mirza Mulkam Khan. It's also about Qanun. So the Constitutional Revolution was more or less about the rule of law, not about the Iranian nationalism in the sense that we see today. But it's after the demise of a constitutional movement that the Iranian nationalist thought begins to emerge, begins to develop, begins to expand. So this takes us to the early, to the again to the late 19th centuries, when we have three important moments, three important writings, three important elites, one of them is Jalaluddin Mirza in in the late 19th century. He writes a book by the title Name Khosravan, or the Letter of Sovereigns, or Letter of Kings. It's interesting that he is the 50th, 60th son of Fath Ali Shah Qajar. He had, you know, 50, 60 children. In the letters of in the Name Khosrawan, in the letters, in the book of sovereigns, he tries to offer a sort of mythical, fictional account of the Iranian past. We have to be careful that he is not familiar with the decipherment of the cuneiform of the Bistun inscription. He is not familiar with the Achaemenids. He is not familiar with many things that is going on in terms of the you know, intellectual debates in Europe. But he offers this proto-nationalist account of the Iranian nationalism. The second one is Mirza Fatali Khan Akhundzadeh. It's interesting that he is a Turkish-speaking subject of uh, of Tsar of Russia. He only visited Iran twice. Obviously, he was raised in Iran until he turned 13 years old. But he produced a book by the title, which title is Maktubat. So Maktubat is a romanticized account of the Iran's pre-Islamic past, in which he talks about the lost grandeur, the lost greatness of Iran at the hand of the Arabs. And if you look at the Maktubat, which is a sort of fictional conversation between Jamal-ud-Dawla and Kamal-ud-Dawla, two people that they represent basically two audience, they talk to each other basically about how Iran was declined and what happened to Iran, what happened to its greatness, to its glory, to its pre-Islamic culture. Well, it all the Arabs, invasion. So the whole book is about a sort of lamenting for or yearning for the pre-Islamic Iran. That's interesting that this book is written first in Turkish, obviously, and then it was translated. He translated to Persian with the help of the Mustafa Dole. So this book is one of the first attempts to kind of romanticize or idealize the Iran's pre-Islamic past. It's interesting that some people, such as scholars such as Reza Zia Ebrahimi, he talks about Akhundzadeh as the founder of Iran's dislocative nationalism. He uses the term dislocative because he dislocated the entire Islamic tradition, post-Islamic Iran tradition, to connect the Qajar weak situation with the pre-Islamic past, for which the Arabs are to be blamed. So he simply he jumps over 12 centuries of the Islamic traditions, post-Islamic Iran. And then the third moment is the third person is Mirza Aghani Kermani. He was born in Kerman, and then he is a sort of spiritual disciple, student of Akhundzadeh. He produces two books, Se Maktub, which is a sort of extension and reiteration and rephrasing and expansion of the Maktubat, and then Sat Khataba, or 100 a lecture, which is actually 42 lectures, not 100. I don't know, but Se Maktub, or 3 letters, is the first one. The whole book is these two books all about one word, as some of the Iranian scholars, they talk about it. Is all about anti-Arab. Arab should be blamed for the Iran's backwardness, for the decline of these glorious past. So you see a lot of lamenting and yearning and calling Arabs by the titles such as lizard eater, camel breeders, and then naked arse, and all these epithets, all these racial designation is really hard. It's hard to read. These books are hard to read because they're so uh, saturated with despicable assertions and descriptions of Arabs. So we have this proto-nationalism coming in under the skin of the Qajar dynasty in the late 20th century, in the early 20th century, and in the late 19th century. But this is not the dominant discourse. This is not the dominant. Actually, this discourse becomes dominant after the demise of the constitutional revolution in 1911. Okay, so just one moment, just I want to emphasize that when you look at the Agha-Khani Kermani's textbook, the writing, specifically these two books, Sat Khataba and Se Maktub, the idea of the Arab conquest or the Islamic conquest is changed, is transformed to Arab invasion. The term invasion comes to be a replacement for the term conquest. And then he frequently talks about that, how Iranians were raped. The term tajawuz, the term ta'addi, the term rape and sexual assault is one of the dominant themes in the Kermani's writings, that kind of very present in his writings. So with this in mind, now we get to Berlin Circle. Okay, so in 1911, the Cultural Revolution is almost gone, and then we are facing the World War One, and then during the World War One we have the German propaganda. They try to invest in the unity of Islam, and they want to provoke or to activate the let's say allegedly whatever, anti-Russian and British imperialists, and they want to basically recruit the Muslimness and the Muslim people in terms of at least the propaganda, the intellectual support. So they invest in the idea of the unity of Islam. It is actually in that time that a group of Iranian scholars, they gathered in Berlin in 1916 at the invitation of the German Social Democrat Party, and they form a group that is called Berlin Circle. So Berlin Circle, just to give you a few names, it includes Hassan Taqizadeh, the founder of Kawa periodical, Hossein Kazemzadeh. He was also a Turkish Azeri speaking, born in Tabriz. He founded the Iranshahr, and he was so fascinated by the Iranian glorious ancient past, pre-Islamic Iran ancient past, that he even changes his last name from Kazemzadeh to Kazemzadeh. He hyphenate his last name, Kazemzadeh Iranshahr. The Iranshahr, a term that is used for the imperial Iran, that was supposed to be used for imperial Iran during the Sassanid dynasty, the last Iranian dynasty, Persian dynasty before the advent of Islam or the Islamic conquest. Okay, and then we have Muhammad Qazwini, Muhammad Ali Jamalzadeh, Ibrahim Pourdaoud, Abdul Hussein Shaybani, Murtaza Moshfegh Kazemi, who also founded the second periodical, Nameh Farangistan. You see it in below in 1922. And then we have Taqiyya Arani. He later joins the group of so-called 53, a leftist leaning ideology, Taqiyya Arani, and then Sadiq Razazadeh, Shafaq Mahmoud Afshar, who founded the periodical of Ayandeh, but Ayandeh was published not in Berlin, but in Tehran. And then we have Ghulam Reza Rashidi Yazimi. Obviously, you all know that Rashidi Yazimi was the only Kurdish that was part of this group. And the rest of them, I don't want to take your time with all this. But this Berlin Circle, this group of Iranian intellectuals in Berlin, they published 4 periodicals, 3 of them in Berlin, supported by the Kawe was basically founded and funded by the German government. But 3 of them, Kawe, Iranshahr, and Nameh Farangistan, were published in Berlin, and the last one of them was published in Iran, Ayandeh, or in Persian, Future, by Mahmoud Afshar. So I will try to be quick as quick as possible to make sure that you have time for questions. So let's get started with the Hassan Taqizadeh. Hassan Taqizadeh is a Turkish Azeri speaking, born in Tabriz. He held so many positions. I mean, a list of political positions, a long list of governmental positions, among which are basically Minister of Foreign Affairs in 1926, right after he came back. He went back to Iran in 1926, and then the Minister of Finance, and also the President of the Senate, along with a long list of the official appointments. He was one of those intellectuals who was fundamental in basically shifting the constitutionalism in Iran toward a sort of authoritarian despotism. He was very foundational in this sense. In 1911, he lived in Istanbul. Many Iranian intellectuals, they lived in Istanbul and also in Egypt, and they published during the in Egypt, and they published in Persian some of those the pre-Berlin Circle periodicals. We had so many magazines and periodicals. They were not Berliners, but they were published there. So in 1913, he lives in New York, and then he gets an invitation and he gets invited by the German government to help German government to fight basically British and Russian imperialism, to help with the propaganda war. So he goes to Berlin, and then in Berlin, with the help of the group of Iranian elites that we just mentioned, he founds, establishes, and publishes the Berlin, the Kawe periodical. So you see, Kawa was published in two stages, first stage and second stage. The first stage was published between 1916 to 1990s. As you see, it is just in the middle of First World War. So it's obvious that he is financially sponsored to help German to fight these two imperialisms. It's so it's very obvious that he promotes German ideology and politics, and with some occasional forays to Iranian nationalism. It's interesting, the very term Kawe, as you all know, Kawe is the blacksmith, a legendary blacksmith of the Shahnameh, and the very name of Kawe and his flag, or the Rafsh Kawiani, basically is suggested by the Kurdologist and linguist Oscar Mann. That's also another interesting fact. And then after the First World War One basically is ended, so the Kawe keeps publishing again, but this time it's more focused on the promoting Iranian national identity and unity through invocation of the Iranian poetry, literature, art, history, specifically Shahnameh, or the Book of Kings of Ferdowsi. So if I am going to summarize the Kawe mission, intellectual mission, in Taqizadeh's words, he says that ایران باید ظاهرا و باطنا و جسما و روحا فرنگی معاب شود و بس, which means Iran outwardly and inwardly, in body and in soul and in spirit, Iran must become Europeanized, with absolute surrender of the West, of Europe. But again, in Kabe, you rarely come across any sort of these racial or racist assertions as much as, or as abundant as the Akhundzadeh and Kermani's writings. So he focuses on the Iranian nationalism, on Iranian glorious past, on the Iranian ancient figures, but the racial assertions are not much present as present as in Akhundzadeh and Kermani's. Okay, so in 1922, with the rise of Reza Shah as a prime minister, and then as the Iranian king, let's say, he goes back to Iran, and then Hossein Kazemzadeh, who was also born in Tabriz, and he was a Turkish Azeri speaking intellectual, he publishes another periodical, the second one, Iranshahr. So Iranshahr, the name of Iranshahr, it denotes the imperial Iran, a kind of term that was supposedly used for the Sassanid Empire to describe themselves, to describe the territories under their control. Iranshahr is extremely influenced by the Weimar Germany cultural milieu and the idea of Volk or nation. So he talks about the idea of spirit, Iranian soul, the term of soul, the term of spirit, that the term of nijat or race, they come to Iranian intellectual thought, Iranian nationalist thought, and obviously Germany at that time described itself as a sort of harbinger of the Western civilization. You all know that in the early 20th century, we have a large body of scholarship, of philosophical scholarship, such as Heidegger and then Spengler and Toynbee. They all talk about the demise and the decline of the Western civilization and the need to be rescued, to be salvaged by the Germans. So I am not sure if the Iranshahr was kind of specifically, categorically influenced by these specific people, but the idea of national spirit comes from this debate that was prevailing in the Germany of the time. Okay, why is Iranshahr important? Iranshahr is kind of takes an opposite position with regard to the Western civilization, opposite position of Kaveh. He doesn't believe that, or it doesn't. I say it doesn't, or he doesn't, because sometimes we talk about Kazemzadeh himself, sometimes we talk about Iranshahr, and then because we have Kazemzadeh Iranshahr, his last name, sometimes we have to say it or he. But anyways, he believes that we have to be critical of the Western civilization. We have to be selective what we pick, what we choose, what we select. And then he focuses on the looking to the east, to the basically Eastern civilization, to mysticism, to Irfan. And that's not surprising that by the end of his life, he talks about Irfan, he talks about mysticism, he talks about Tasawwuf. So another importance of the Iranshahr lays in the fact that for the first time, systematically, let's say, Iranshahr tries to integrate Shiism into Iranian nationalism. So the Iranian nationalism from the mid 19th century to the early 20th century is more or less focused on the anti-Arab, anti-Semitism, anti-religion, secularism, let's say, the idea of progress and enlightenment, which is frequently kind of present in Akhundzadeh and Kerman's writing. But now Iranshahr, comes and says, okay, well, we have to make, we have to connect these two. So he claims that the symbiosis or the connection between Shiism and Persianism could be like this. The Imam Hussein, as you all know, the Shiite Imam, basically, he married to daughter of Yazgir II, the last king of the Sassanid Empire, Shahr Banu. And then, so the symbiosis or the integration between the Iranian Aryan soul and the Semitic soul or the Arab soul now is not only historical, not only spiritual, but also racial and also physiological in a way. So he systematically talks about this compatibility that we see this compatibility 3 decades later in the writings of Ali Shariati when he talks about the marriage or the coexistence or the marriage or the integration of the Aryan soul and the Semitic soul. That's very important. So actually, very important claim by Iranshahr. So again, he talks about things such as nejad or race, khun or blood. In Iranshahr, he talks about how Iranian and by extension Persian women, they should marry the Iranian men because they should preserve the Iranian or the Aryan pure blood. The idea of the purity of the blood that was contaminated for 12th, 13th centuries, I don't know, by Arabs, by Mongols, by Turks, by anyone as he talks, as he speaks. So now you have to preserve that. You cannot simply marry everyone. So you have to make sure that you have your share of responsibility in the purification of the Iranian race, of the Iranian blood. So the Iranshahr might be also of some interest for our people, for our friends of working on Ottoman studies, because in Iranshahr he talks about in one of the essays, essays by the title Ma'arif Osmani, the education in Ottoman Empire. He talks about the Committee of Progress and Union, the CUP. And then to show you, to demonstrate the how tremendous was the influence of CPU and the things that were going on at that time in the early days of the Turkish nationalism on the Iranian nationalism, on Iranshahr specifically. Let me read you this part of the Ma'arif Osmani. which is, very telling. It's self-explanatory in many ways. It says that if the work of the ethnic cleansing goes forward in the present pace, there will be no ethnicity except the Turks in Ottoman land after the conclusion of the war. And they will be rid of struggles and convert operations and intentions of the separatist elements such as Armenians, Greek and Arabs and others. This cleansing is an essential prerequisite for establishing an independent Ottoman country. Any other government would have acted precisely the same way if they were in such situation. Ottomans are now using what they have learned from Europeans. And then he continues in the next page. He says, the CUP, despite committing many heinous acts, was a savior for the Turkish nation and should be regarded as the architect of the current fate of Turkish nation. If we had such a powerful political faction in Iran, the Iranian nation would have surely advanced by 100 years. And then again, in another book by the name Tajalliyat or Manifestations. And the whole book is title is The Manifestation of the Iranian Spirit in the Historical Eras, a gift for the nascent Iranian race. He talks about the Iranian Aryan race. This book is basically a sort of um, Aryanist account of the Iranian history. I would like to share with you some of the excerpts that I brought for you here. It says that I see in the Iranian spirit above all else a power of generalization and an ability for unification or encompassing mastery. And then examples of this spirit include Zoroaster, Mani, Mazdak, Dariush in pre-Islamic Iran, and after the advent of Islam and the invasion of the Arabs and Mongols, the Iranian spirit persisted through or survived through its intelligence, adaptability, and the assimilation and civilizing of its conquerors. The Iranian nation has been able to dissolve all the invaders from Alexander the Great to Mongols to Afghans and to any invaders that they imagined. And then again, let's a little bit talk about how Hossein Kazemzadeh characterized Iranian spirit, Ruh Irani or Iranian spirit. He says, Iranian spirit, just like a polished mirror, has made visible all the captivating features and the unique virtues exclusive of proud Aryan race across all its historical period. The Iranian spirit has always been an exhibition of the manifestation of the Aryan spirit amid centuries of conquest, subjugation, and destruction. It has displayed and preserved the advantages of its Indo-European race. Now it resonates, with what William Jones was talking about in the late 18th centuries, and Max Muller, the idea of the Indo-Iranian race, such as sharp intelligence, quick wit and loftiness, open-mindedness, intricate imagination, and the abundance of intellectual outputs and the power to dissolve and civilize other ethnic groups. Okay, so I will stop here. I will go to the third one. I will be quick, I promise. I know that I go long. So the third periodical is Name Farangistan. Name Farangistan, or the letter of Farang means was used for the Europe, for the West. Name Farangistan literally means the letter of West or letter of Europe, uh, or the Western letter, let's say. But Name Farangistan in 1924, it is edited by Moshfegh Kazemi. He was born in Tehran, and is in the first page of the Name Farangistan. You see this phrase: if you want to become modern, learn the true path of life, and know Europe, you should read Farangistan. Farangistan is a kind of return to Kaveh. Farangistan doesn't talk about Shiism, doesn't talk about a religion. He goes back to those principles, to those Western absolute surrender to the West, the principle that was kind of formulated by Kaveh, by Hassan Taqizadeh. And then we see a return to Kaveh, as I said. Farangistan disseminates the idea of the authoritarian modernization, that we have a man of order, we have Iron Fist to civilize these people, to civilize Iranian, no matter what it takes. And then one of the role model would be, according to Nameh Farangistan, would be Mussolini, because he's a model. He is knowledgeable in the science of administration of the nation, but he's despot. At the same time, he knows how to bypass the parliament, but at the same time, he cares about the nation. We need someone like him. And then in the pages of the Nameh Farangistan, again, we see so many references to CUP and to what the Turkish people and the Turkish nation and basically the CUP had achieved, and we have to look to Turkey, and then we have to learn from them. We have to emulate. We see a kind of emulating young Turks. And finally, we have the fourth periodical that was published by the Berlin Circle, Ayandeh, which means a future. Ayandeh is published in Iran, in Tehran, at a time when the Reza Shah, or the Reza Shah Pahlavi, had already established the modern state, the Pahlavi dynasty, and now we have a manual, basically practical guide, how to build a nation. Because we talked about anti-Arab, we articulated how Arabs were responsible for the demise of the Iranians' glorious past, and then we talked about all these racial things and the how great we were. So now the question is that how to build this Iranianness, how to build this Persianness. So Mahmoud Afshar is the editor. He is one of the most ultra-nationalist, racist authors and intellectuals in the history of Iran since the 18th century. So he's the he's the founder also of a sort of party called Pan-Iranism versus Pan-Turkism and Pan-Arabism. Don't forget that we have to keep in mind that Iranian nationalism since the mid 19th centuries all the way to early 20th century is also a response to the Turkish nationalism. Even before, the Safavid dynasty also always defined itself versus the Sunni Ottoman. And now the Sunni Shia distinction is translated into, again, Iranian nationalism, pan-Iranian, pan-Iranism versus the pan-Turkism. So the element of religion should be really highlighted, should be really emphasized. So he defined pan-Iranism as a party and as a sort of intellectual discourse, as a sort of unity of Iranian, the unification of all those of Iranian descent, to preserve the grandeur and the dignity of shared millennia old history, as well as a common literary language and literature. And by literary language and literature, he means Persian language, not any other non-Persian language. And then you see that in the pages of Ayandeh, in Afshar's writing, you see classifications similar to those of Dogobin classification of white, black, and yellow, but he talks about the classifications of white, green, green and red, if I remember. So, for example, he talks about the Arabs as green, not basically as, he comes with this kind of classifications. So he provides a practical manual for the Pahlavi dynasty. In the first issue of Ayandeh, he talks about the need for schooling system, to making books free, in Persian, obviously free and available to all people everywhere in Iran. He talks about building railroads not only to to industrialize Iran, but actually to make sure that by the in the following decades nobody knows who is who, and then accelerate basically a sort of demographic movement among people so that they can basically they assimilate themselves into Iranian culture. He talks about demographic changes. He talks about renaming the geographic regions such as Kurdistan, Baluchistan, Kurdistan. These names should be kind of uh, uh, changed and replaced by Persian name. Okay, so I'm getting to the last slide of my presentation to give you a taste of what it looks like, what this manual looked like. The Ayandeh, for example, in one of his essays in the Ayandeh by the title Our Ideal, Our National Unity, he says, national unity has two components: political independence and territorial integrity. The widespread adoption and the expansion of the Persian language, he argues, it is the only means to foster the national identity. And then he continues to say, anyone who is interested in Iran history and cares about the Persian language and literature and the Shia religion must keep in mind that if the fabric of unity in this country collapses, everything will go down. Therefore, we all must wish and try with one heart and one voice for the Persian language to become prevalent throughout Iran, gradually supplanting foreign languages. This can be achieved only through the establishment of elementary schools everywhere, the enactment of the laws of compulsory public and free education, and the provision of necessary resources for it. So as you see, the Ayanda talks about how the nation state or how the Iranian nation state should be basically created, should be constructed on the ground. So after 1925, obviously, by 1925, when the Reza Shah comes to power, the political agenda, the intellectual discourse of the Persianism is already there. It's very well laid out, very well, uh, you know, very well explained. So what Reza Shah does basically is just to implement this ideology and this discourse. Of course, he starts with the Persianization or Farsification of the non-Persian communities, and also for decades to come, obviously, he implements the idea of one nation, one country, and one language. So I will stop here because whatever happens after 1925 is a kind of the expansion or the articulation or basically reformulation, or let me say updating the Berlin Circle. So honestly, since the mid 20th century, and since the early 20th century, I'm sorry, since 1925, nothing has changed or little has changed in the Iranian nationalism. The Iranian nationalism has been basically has sort of preserve its emphasis on the Persian language and the Shia religion. And we have to be careful, the final point, we have to be careful when we talk about the Shiism, we talk about Shiism as a discourse, as a second pillar of the Iranian nationalism. It is through Shiism that the non-Persian communities are integrated into Iranian nationalism. So when we talk about, let's say, the Jina movement and now the anti-compulsory hijab, and many people might interpret, let's say, what we have now in Iran is sort of like anti-religion, anti-Iranian nationalist. This is totally wrong. This might be interpreted as a sort of anti-clerical, anti-ruhaniyat in many ways, clerics, but definitely it is not anti-religion in its institutional, in its discursive sense.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much
you,
for
Ahmed.
listening. I know that I went too long, but I appreciate your patience.
No,
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed, for this interesting and quite informative presentation. Now we can move to Q&A session, and I'll be glad to take your questions. So you can either raise your hand or just type your questions in the chat. Okay, I see Mamusta Mujahid. Go ahead, Mamusta Mujahid.
Perhaps to open the floor for questions, I would like to say thank you, Dr. Mohammadpour. This was really quite interesting. There's a lot to unpack with respect to Iranian history, Iranian politics, identity politics. What got my attention most is how much it resonates with contemporary Kurdish nationalism in terms of certain direct influences like appropriation of Kawa as part of Kurdish discourse, claims to Indo-European origins, even Aryan, emphasis in some Kurdish nationalist discourse. These are quite interesting demonization of pre-Islamic history of respective peoples, whether it's Iranian or Turkish or Kurdish, European origins, internalization of European theories about the, beginnings of a particular nation and so on. To what extent do you think this is just a kind of roadmap of any nationalist project that, Iranians had their version, Turks had their version, and now Kurds are going through a similar thing. I'm curious about your, what you drove from this to the Kurdish case. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Bilici. I appreciate it. It's really an important question. That the issue is that these discussions, despite being done for for decades in or centuries in Europe, or specifically in the European in the Western circle, when it comes to the Iranian nationalist thought, this debate is still kind of overlooked. You see that when you look at the mainstream Iranian studies, they talk about Iranian nationalism, they talk about Aryanism. You don't find that much about the William Jones and Max Muller, and then they take it for granted. They basically, they might be critical of the Aryan race theory, and they might even think that this theory was kind of undermined. And even Max Muller himself, he said that I got it wrong. Muller said he said that nobody can on the earth, nobody can determine the date of the Aryan invasion. So, but despite all this, the Aryanism has been the dominant paradigm of the Iranian nationalism, and still the Iranian nationalist elites, they try to bypass or to circumvent or to overlook this discussion. So you don't see that much, given that. And then how it is relevant to the Kurdish, nationalist or Kurdish politics of identity, to use your words, because most of the Kurds in Rojhelat, as you know, they're kind of educated, including me. We were educated, and we were kind of assimilated into this paradigm of thinking about the Aryanism. So when it comes to the Kurdish nationalism or Kurdish politics of identity, at least in Rojhelat, I believe that the Kurdish political parties, the Kurdish actors, the Kurdish intellectuals, they have to understand that, they have to understand that Iranian nationalism is not a political project, it's an intellectual project. And it should be met, it should be resisted with a sort of intellectual alternative. Just to endorse, to in line with your argument that I see the Iranian the Kurdish nationalism in Kurdish nationalist circle, this debate has yet to be dominant. I don't see any any sign, I don't see any indication that we are discussing these issues, but many Kurdish scholars or many scholars of Kurdish studies, they simply use the terms such as Iranian Indo-European languages, and they are very proud that Kurdish is one of those Aryan or Indo-European languages, while for example, the most recent literature produced by the Indian scholars actually, because the whole debate was started there in Indian subcontinent, they proved basically that all languages from South Asia to Anatolia, they had some sort of relationship over the history of the course of centuries. So it's not a new innovation, it's not a new discovery. So I think that the Kurdish political opposition, the Kurdish political intellectuals, the Kurdish elites, they have to come to this point that Iran is not, or Iranian nationalism, or the Islamic Republic of Iran, or the Iranian nationalism in both manifestations of Islamic Republic and Pahlavi dynasty, it's an intellectual creation, and we have to undermine, we have to dismantle this creation through the first stage, through the intellectual engagement with this topic, with these concepts, with these inventions.
Thank you. Well, we have another question from Checo, and the question is, you have often referred to Arab invasions and colonialism. How can the indigenous people of the Maghrib and the Middle East, particularly the Kurds, focus on nation building, similar to how Iranian has? In your opinion, what should be their primary focus?
So, great question. Well, the politics of identity is not something bad in itself. It doesn't mean that, the issue is that my nation building should not cost you a genocide, should not cost you ethnic cleansing. Nobody, claims that, okay, well, the Turks should not have a state of their own, but should that state building, cost, the genocide of Armenians and Turks and and Greeks and the other minoritized ethnic groups? That's the question. So we should make a distinction between the politics of identity of the dominant community and the politics of identity of the dominated communities. So, for example, the Arab nationalists. So, Arab nationalism in Iraq, for example, during the Ba'ath Party, it caused the genocide and the Anfal from 1972 to 1988. So that's the question. So it's not about like denying people or nations of having a state of their own. It's about basically the idea that the nation state should not cause of one nation should not cause the other nation's genocide and ethnic cleansing. Very simple.
Thank you. One more question, Mustafa, from Sebastian Sharowski. How do Iranian Kurds view the developments of the Kurdish autonomous region in Iraq or Rojava? Would they be willing to embark on such a project to acquire autonomy if given the chance?
This is a great question. Thank you for asking. Well, honestly, it's just very, whatever I say is very speculative. I believe that, I don't think, when I put it in the context of the international politics today, I don't see, the first question is that where this opportunity should come from. That's the major question, is that, how this opportunity should be provided, who is in charge for providing this opportunity for the Iranian Kurds, given the political, the international politics going on in the Middle East. Honestly, I am not very optimistic about any opportunity to be able for Kurds to be able to, at least anytime soon, to be able to engage into any sort of constructive, at least, discussion with the dominant ethnic group. Quite on the contrary, over the last 20 years, 3 decades, over the last 3 decades, I think that the Iranian nationalism has become more and more aggressive when it comes to the the inclusion of the non-Persian identities since the over the last 3 decades, we see a shift from the Iranian studies to the Persianite studies, and the equivalence of the Iranianness with the Persianness, which makes it very unlikely for the dominant ethnic group to let go the power and to let go or to engage into. That's one of, actually, to make one more point. This is one of my critiques of the Kurdish leftist ideology. They talk about the politics of class, and that we have to be we have to start a sort of negotiation and debate with the Iranian left. And I say, okay, well, with whom do you want to engage? I mean, do you see any people? Who are those leftist people? Who are those people who are going to accept you, are going to listen to you? So that's one of the things that really, yeah.
I have a question, Mohammed. In relationship to Iranian nationalism, you mentioned that, they talked about Iranian, like the purification of the race. Did they do anything about, like the purification of language in a way that, did they try to weed out, let's say, Arabic words or Turkic words from the language, so to make it so-called pure Persian? Or
Yes, the first project of the Arabization of Persian language, or the purification of Persian language, was started by the Akhundzadeh in, I think it was in 1857. He came up with a project of the changing of alphabet to get rid of, as he said, to get rid of the Arabic language. And actually, he thought that using the Arabic language and having so many letters for the same word, for the same letter. Like in Arabic, we have like 4 types of se. I mean, Iranian, Persian, they pronounce all 4 types as se, such as seth, swad, the, all this. They just simply pronounce se in Persian. And then Akhundzadeh believed that the Arabic language is one of the major reasons of the Iranians' illiteracy. And that's one of the reasons that they are so unknowledgeable, they are so illiterate in many ways. And he came with the change in the alphabet. Actually, Mirza Mulkam Khan, who was also one of the modernist elites, he came up with his own alphabet. And then Akhundzadeh actually suggested alphabet, his project, to the Ottoman Scientific Association, which was rejected. So there has been many efforts, but the Iranian nationalist elites and the Iranian culture, they would never get rid of the Arabic language, and they simply accepted Arabic, even though they had still, they're trying to come with some equivalence for the Arabic or for English, but it has proved to be really unsuccessful.
Okay, I think we don't have any other questions, so I think we can finish here. Thank you very much again, Dr. Ahmad Mohammadpour, and
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you so much. I'm sorry if I went too long, but there is a lot to unpack. There is a lot to say, and I try to be kind of like as comprehensive as possible. And I know that sometimes it gets kind of very divergent from the main topic.
Was great, Mustafa. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.